The Dodger Stadium stood magnificent against the purple-orange Los Angeles twilight on September 15, 1987. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath, as if nature understood the significance of what was about to unfold beneath its canopy. 81,177 souls had converged on this hallowed ground of baseball, transformed tonight into a temple of music. They came from all walks of life. Teenagers with wildly teased hair and homemade tour shirts, couples who had saved for months to afford tickets, families with wide-eyed children experiencing their first concert, celebrities and industry insiders pretending not to be impressed while secretly vibrating with the same anticipation as everyone else. The air was thick with expectation, perfume, aftershave, and a lingering scent of thousands of concession stand meals. As darkness fell completely, the massive crowd began to stir, a human ocean with currents of excitement rippling through it. Chants of Michael rose sporadically, gaining momentum before dissipating, only to rise again elsewhere in the stadium. The Bad Tour had already gained legendary status. 3 months in, and critics were falling over themselves to find new superlatives. Michael Jackson, at the absolute apex of his powers at 29 years old, was redefining what a live performance could be. Not merely a concert, but theatrical spectacle, dance exhibition, and religious experience rolled into one. Tonight marked the first of 4 sold-out shows at Dodger Stadium, the hometown spectacle for the king of pop in the city where he had made his adult life. The stakes were impossibly high. The who's who of Hollywood sat in premium seats, notebooks and mental scorecards ready. Michael knew this, felt the weight of expectation pressing down on his slender shoulders as he completed his pre-show rituals backstage. 8 costume specialists fussed around him, adjusting his elaborate black leather outfit with military precision. Michael stood perfectly still, eyes closed in meditation, conserving every ounce of energy for the marathon performance ahead. His mind, however, was churning. For weeks, he had been planning something special for the Los Angeles shows, something unexpected that would cement these concerts in music history. The idea had come to him during a late-night creative session, and once planted, had grown into an obsession. His team had been sworn to secrecy, elaborate precautions taken to prevent leaks. Even now, only 3 people knew exactly what would happen midway through tonight's show. The house lights finally dimmed completely, plunging the stadium into darkness so profound it felt physical. 81,000 voices rose as one, a wall of sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the venue. For 90 seconds, nothing happened, a deliberate tease that Michael had choreographed to heighten anticipation to an almost unbearable degree. Then, a single spotlight pierced the darkness, illuminating an empty microphone stand center stage. Another 30 seconds of excruciating anticipation. The crowd's roar somehow intensified, becoming something primal and unified, transcending mere noise to become a physical force. Then, in a burst of pyrotechnics that momentarily turned night into day, Michael Jackson was simply there, as if materialized from the collective desire of the crowd. He stood motionless in his iconic pose, legs slightly apart, head bowed, one gloved hand raised toward the heavens. The eruption that followed defied description. It wasn't just sound. It was energy unleashed, the collective release of tension so powerful that several sound technicians would later swear they saw the massive speaker arrays physically shudder. For 7 seconds, Michael remained frozen, allowing the moment to burn itself into the memory of every person present. Then, with timing so precise it seemed superhuman, he began to move just as the opening notes of the show crashed through the speakers. What followed was Michael at the absolute height of his performing powers. Song after song, dance sequence after dance sequence, each executed with a perfection that seemed to transcend human capability. The audience responded in waves, screaming, then falling into stunned silence, then screaming again. Hardened music journalists found themselves jumping up and down like teenagers. A-list celebrities sang along word for word, temporarily stripped of their practice cool. Halfway through the planned set list, during a brief costume change, Michael huddled with his stage manager, confirming that everything was in place for what would come next. Backstage was controlled chaos, dancers gulping water, technicians making minute adjustments, security personnel communicating through headsets. In a private area, separated from this organized frenzy, waited the evening's secret. Michael emerged back on stage in a new outfit, gleaming white shirt with elaborate embroidery, black pants with silver accents catching the light with each movement. He moved to the center microphone, his breathing controlled despite the physical demands of the performance thus far. Los Angeles, he spoke, his voice softer than many expected, creating an immediate intimacy that belied the vastness of the stadium. My home. The crowd's response was immediate and deafening. Michael waited for it to subside, a small, genuine smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I wanted to do something special tonight, he continued. Something just for you. The anticipation was palpable, a living thing that seemed to hover in the air. Music has given me so much, Michael said, his voice taking on a reflective quality that caused the massive crowd to lean forward collectively, 80,000 people trying to move closer to a whispered confidence. But the greatest gift has been the friendships, the connections with other artists who understand this journey. He paused, eyes scanning the endless sea of faces. Tonight, I want to share one of those connections with you. The crowd's murmuring took on a speculative quality. What was coming? A duet with one of his famous siblings? A surprise guest appearance from another chart-topping artist? There's someone I admire deeply, Michael continued. Someone whose artistry and vision have pushed me to be better, to dig deeper. Another pause, perfectly timed. Someone who, like me, understands what it means to be both blessed and burdened by gift. The stadium grew quieter, the collective anticipation almost painful in its intensity. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael's voice took on a ceremonial quality. Please welcome to the stage, Prince. For 3 full seconds, the crowd didn't react. The name hung in the air, its significance too monumental to process immediately. Then, as understanding dawned, a roar began that built and built until it seemed the sound might tear open the night sky. From stage right, emerging from shadows into strategic spotlights, came the unmistakable figure of Prince Rogers Nelson. He was dressed in a purple suit of such perfect tailoring it seemed painted onto his slight frame, moving with that distinctive combination of feline grace and barely contained energy that was his alone. The two icons, often positioned as rivals by the media, the subjects of countless comparison articles and fan debates, met at center stage. The symbolism was lost on no one. The king of pop and the purple one, the two most boundary-pushing, genre-defying artists of their generation, sharing the same physical space, breathing the same air. They regarded each other for a moment that stretched into eternity. Then, simultaneously, they smiled. Not the practiced performance smiles of superstars, but something genuine and almost private, a recognition between two men who shared an experience few others could comprehend. They embraced briefly, and the crowd's volume, somehow, found a new ceiling. A woman in the 14th row fainted, overcome by the historical significance of what she was witnessing. A music executive in a premium box reached instinctively for his phone, then stopped, realizing he simply wanted to be present for this moment. Michael stepped back to his microphone. "We've prepared a little something together," he said, the understatement drawing appreciative laughter from the crowd. Prince moved to a second microphone that had been discreetly placed during the brief blackout, adjusting its height with casual precision. A guitar technician materialized from the wings, handing Prince his signature instrument with the ceremonial care of a knight being presented with his sword. The first notes that emerged from Prince's guitar were haunting, unfamiliar, yet somehow nostalgic. Michael closed his eyes, swaying slightly as the melody washed over him. When he began to sing, his voice blended with the guitar in perfect harmony, creating something that felt both completely new and eerily timeless. It was a song no one in the audience recognized, later revealed to be an original composition The two had worked on sporadically over the past year, never intended for either of their albums, but created purely as an artistic conversation between them. The song spoke of isolation at the pinnacle, of being misunderstood even while being adored, of finding rare connection in a world of surface interactions. Without explicitly referencing their parallel journeys, it painted a portrait of two artists who had climbed the same mountain by different paths, discovering at the summit that they were less alone than they had believed. As the song progressed, Prince added his voice to Michael's, their contrasting tones, Michael's disciplined precision and Prince's raw emotion, creating harmonies that seemed to physically affect the audience. People held onto each other, some weeping openly, others standing in reverent stillness. A teenage boy, brought to the concert reluctantly by his Jackson fan mother, found himself covered in goosebumps, suddenly understanding something fundamental about art and humanity that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. The song built to a climax that featured Michael dancing while Prince played a guitar solo of such blistering intensity that 3 strings broke in succession, each one whipping through the air like a live thing. The moment should have been a disaster. Instead, Prince incorporated the breaking strings into the performance, the increasing resistance creating new sounds that perfectly matched the emotional crescendo of the piece. When the song ended, there was that rarest of concert phenomena, complete silence. 81,000 people collectively holding their breath, processing what they had just witnessed. Then the applause began, not the automatic response of crowd at a big show, but something organic and genuine that built slowly into a sustained roar that would continue, unabated, for nearly 5 minutes. During this ovation, Michael and Prince simply stood side by side, neither performing nor playing to the crowd, but existing in a moment of shared accomplishment. Something shifted then, the energy changing as the two exchanged whispers that couldn't be heard even by the closest audience members. Prince nodded, a mischievous smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Michael's response was a rare, unguarded laugh. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories about the King of Pop that will take you behind the velvet rope and into the remarkable moments that defined a legend. What came next sent the already frenzied crowd into complete delirium. The band struck up the instantly recognizable introduction to one of Michael's biggest hits. Prince, still center stage, began playing along, adding flourishes and counterpoints that transformed the familiar song into something new and dangerous. Michael, feeding off this energy, launched into a dance sequence of such complexity and passion that several of his regular dancers, watching from the wings, would later describe it as the most inspired performance they had ever seen from him. For the next 45 minutes, the two legends traded songs, each performing on the other's material, creating hybrid versions that honored the originals while pushing them into uncharted territory. They moved together across the massive stage with a synchronicity that suggested months of rehearsal rather than the mere hours they had actually spent preparing. The crowd's response transcended typical concert behavior, becoming something almost religious in its intensity. People who had arrived as casual fans found themselves transformed into lifelong devotees. Those who had come skeptical left as believers. In the VIP section, major artists watched with expressions ranging from admiration to outright envy, some making notes, others simply surrendering to the spectacle. During a particularly intense moment, as Prince and Michael stood back to back at center stage, a young girl of perhaps 8 years old somehow managed to elude security and dash onto the stage. The crowd gasped collectively. Security personnel moved to intercept, but before they could reach her, Michael noticed her presence. Without missing a beat in the choreography, he signaled to the guards to stand down. The girl stood frozen in the presence of her idol, tears streaming down her face, clearly overwhelmed by her own daring and by the reality of being so close to the object of her adoration. Michael, without breaking stride in the performance, moved toward her with that fluid grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics. As Prince continued playing, building a musical bridge that hadn't existed in the original song, Michael knelt before the child, bringing himself to her eye level. The stadium collectively held its breath. 80,000 people, suddenly silent witnesses to this unexpected moment of intimacy amidst the spectacle. "What's your name?" Michael asked, his voice picked up by the microphone he still held. "Sophia," the girl managed to say, her voice small but clear in the sudden quiet. "Sophia," Michael repeated, the name becoming musical in his mouth. "Thank you for coming to see us tonight." The simple acknowledgement, the us that included her in the evening's magic, caused fresh tears to spill down the child's cheeks. Michael reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that glinted under the stage lights. A silver pin in the shape of a half-moon that had been affixed to his costume earlier. With deliberate ceremony, he pinned it to the girl's T-shirt. "A reminder," he said, his words carried to every corner of the massive venue. "That magic can happen when you least expect it." The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. Not the screaming adulation of earlier, but something deeper and more emotional. People embraced strangers next to them, overcome by the simple humanity of the gesture. Parents pulled their children closer. Couples reached for each other's hands. Prince, watching from a few feet away, nodded his approval, a rare, genuine smile visible beneath the carefully maintained mystique. A security guard gently led Sophia back to her parents, the silver pin catching the light with each step, transforming an ordinary child into the keeper of something precious. The concert resumed its planned course, but something had changed. A deepening of the connection between performers and audience, a shared acknowledgement that they were all participating in something that transcended entertainment. As the show approached its conclusion, Michael and Prince once again converged at center stage. The house lights came up slightly, allowing them to see the vast sea of humanity before them. "Los Angeles," Michael addressed the crowd, his voice carrying the slight hoarseness of a performer who had given everything. "Thank you for letting us share this night with you." The response was deafening, a wave of sound that seemed physical in its intensity. "Before we go," Prince added, stepping to his microphone, "we want to leave you with one last gift." The band began to play softly, a melody that combined elements from signature songs of both artists, woven together with such subtle artistry that the seams were invisible. What followed was a duet of such emotional power that hardened music journalists found themselves wiping away unexpected tears. The two icons moved around each other in a dance that was part choreography, part improvisation, their voices intertwining in harmonies that seemed to physically affect the audience. The song built slowly, each verse adding new layers of intensity until the final chorus, when both artists hit and held a note of such perfect pitch and emotional resonance that it seemed to hang in the air even after they had finished singing. In that suspended moment, Prince removed a purple bandana from his wrist, a trademark accessory instantly recognizable to his fans, and handed it to Michael with a gesture that was both casual and ceremonial. Michael accepted it with a nod of understanding, then reached up to remove the single earring he wore, a small silver cross that caught the stage lights and scattered them like stars. He placed it in Prince's palm, closing the other man's fingers around it with both hands. The exchange, witnessed by 81,000 people, yet somehow deeply personal, spoke volumes about mutual respect and shared experience. The final notes faded, and for a moment, there was complete silence, that rarest of concert phenomena. Then the applause began, building into a sustained roar that would continue unabated as the two legends took their bows, arms linked in a physical manifestation of the bridge their music had built between their artistic worlds. As they prepared to leave the stage, Michael turned to the audience one last time. "Remember," he said, his soft voice somehow reaching every corner of the massive venue, "what brings us together will always be stronger than what pulls us apart." With that, they were gone, disappearing into darkness as suddenly as they had emerged from it hours earlier. The house lights came up on a crowd transformed, strangers exchanging contact information, determined to stay connected to others who had shared this experience. Parents carrying sleeping children who would one day be told they had witnessed history, couples who had found something deeper in their relationships through the shared emotional journey. Outside the stadium, the night air was filled with snippets of conversation, attempted descriptions of favorite moments, expressions of disbelief and wonder. News crews interviewed shell-shocked fans who struggled to find words adequate to the experience. "You just had to be there" became a common refrain, simultaneously insufficient and entirely accurate. In a quiet corner of the backstage area, away from the organized chaos of crew breakdown and equipment packing, Michael and Prince sat in comfortable silence, still buzzing with the energy of the performance, but too drained to speak. Finally, Prince broke the silence. "They'll be talking about this one for a while," he said, a master of understatement. Michael smiled, a genuine expression rarely captured by cameras. "Some nights are bigger than us," he replied. "They belong to everyone who was there." Prince nodded his agreement, turning the silver earring over in his fingers, studying how it caught and refracted the light. "See you tomorrow night?" he asked, referencing the second of Michael's 4 scheduled shows. Michael's smile widened. "With something completely different," he confirmed. "Keep them guessing." 20 years later, in a small music store in Reseda, the silver half-moon pin that had once adorned Michael's costume would hang in a simple frame behind the counter. Sophia, now the store's owner, would occasionally tell the story to customers who inquired about it, not to boast or name drop, but to share how a moment of unexpected kindness had shaped her life's direction. The pin had become not just a memento of meeting her childhood idol, but a tangible reminder that magic could indeed appear when least expected, a lesson that had guided her through the inevitable challenges of adulthood. And on quiet evenings, after closing the shop, she would sometimes play recordings from that legendary night, allowing the music to transport her back to Dodger Stadium and a moment when 2 kings shared a throne, creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. In her mind, she could still see them perfectly, Michael Jackson and Prince, at the height of their considerable powers, pushing each other to new creative heights, reminding everyone fortunate enough to be there that music at its best is not merely entertainment, but a force that can unite strangers, heal divisions, and create moments of collective joy so intense they imprint themselves permanently on the soul.